So it's my pleasure to welcome yet another of our distinguished alumna. It's great to have Paige Kassalen today as our invited guest speaker. So Paige, in a very short time, has a lot of accomplishments that many of us can only dream of. So let me go ahead and just give you a quick run through of her biography. So Paige has an electrical engineering degree from Virginia Tech, so UC Bradley Department, as of 2015. And then she did a master's of information systems management at Carnegie Mellon in 2020. She began her career as the only American electrical engineer working on Solar Impulse 2, which was the first solar-powered airplane to fly around the world. This role landed Kassalen a spot on the 2017 Forbes 30 under 30 list, along with feature articles in Glamour, Teen Vogue, and Fast Company. Since Solar Impulse, Kassalen worked in the manufacturing and finance industries to create implementation strategies for a range of emerging technology trends, from autonomous vehicles to machine learning. She was the chief operating officer at Crowd AI, a startup named by Forbes as one of the most promising AI companies of 2021. In 2023, Crowd AI was acquired by Saab Inc., and Kassalen now serves as the chief of staff for the strategy division, working to integrate artificial intelligence throughout the organization. For the past year, Kassalen has been a writer for the IEEE and their Insight blog, and has published over 50 articles on tech leadership and professionalism. So our talk today, as you probably figured from our bio, will interface with AI and machine learning, so it should be of interest to a lot of you. So without further ado, let me go ahead and hand the floor to Paige. Thanks, Paige.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here with you all today. As you just heard, I graduated in 2015 with a degree in electrical engineering. And so, of course, Virginia Tech has an extremely special place in my heart. And, even after this presentation, I'd love to stay connected with you all and just continue to share my experiences, but also learn from you all too. I mean, we're all going to, they're the best person. Yeah, let's all continue to rock it. But my topic today, building business cases for AI implementation. I want to dive into this by first kind of going through my background a little bit and where I developed this interest for building business cases and even understood kind of what a business case actually was. And so Ravi kind of highlighted this, but my first job out of college was working on the first solar powered airplane to fly around the world. And as I was jumping to enter Sandman during graduation, the last thing I was ever imagining was that I was going to have the chance to fly around the world with this experimental airplane going to places like Cairo, Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, even just spending 3 months in Hawaii working on a project like this. It was unlike anything I had ever seen before. It was kind of looking like a dragonfly, as you can see. The wingspan was as wide as a Boeing 730 or 747. So it was kind of like 2 basketball courts on each side of this like tiny fuselage that sat 1 pilot. And the plane weighed 5,000 pounds, so as much as an SUV. So it was this very unique structure. And I was working in the manufacturing industry. That's what I did after graduating from Virginia Tech. And I just happened to take a job with this company that was a strategic technology partner for this project. So it was a project based out of Switzerland. And that's how I ended up being one of the only American on the project. I applied for the job and ended up jetting off to Hawaii and joining this international team. As I had mentioned, we were going around the world working on this airplane, and I was learning a lot. I was learning a lot technically. I was learning a lot socially, kind of my first job working with this international team. But I also started learning a bit about building business cases. And this was something I didn't expect to learn. So as we were going from place to place with this airplane, Does anyone have any idea what the #1 question I would get is? And so I'm gonna need someone to raise their hand and give me one guess. So who's gonna be brave? Yes. What if it rains? That's a good question. So we did get the question, what if it rains? We got the question, where does the pilot go to the bathroom? Which was always, an interesting topic. But the #1 question we actually got was, why are you doing this? And not, Paige, why are you physically doing this project? But why did this team build a solar powered airplane, and why are you flying around the world with it? And I had my rationale for doing it. This was obviously the coolest job any electrical engineer could ever do. So, duh, I'm here. But I realized I can't answer that for why this project's happening. You can't say because it's cool if you're trying to get funding, if you're trying to get strategic partnerships. And really, if you're trying to influence change or policies, you need to have this strong rationale. You need to have a business case. And this experience has really influenced my career for building these business cases for emerging technologies. So, as kind of talking about my background a little bit, I graduated from Virginia Tech. I had worked with the solar powered airplane. Afterwards, I continued working with the manufacturing company Covestro. So this was the company I had joined that was the strategic partner. They were a spinoff from Bayer, the pharmaceutical company. And after finishing with the solar powered airplane, I went back to Covestro and I started hearing about artificial intelligence. And of course, in the very scientific way of, let's just sprinkle it on everything and everything will work like magic, which is, of course, not how things work, right? But I wanted to understand, how does the technology work? I wanted to get my hands on the keyboard. I wanted to actually build the technology to figure out how could you deploy this technology in smart ways to make a difference. So that took me to Carnegie Mellon, where I did a similar program to this, where it was just 3 semesters. It was a Master of Information Systems Management. And I focused on artificial intelligence, got my hands on the keyboard, and actually built these solutions. I was quickly able to see what the power of the technology could bring. And my goal from this was to understand, again, where could it actually be deployed in a smart way? Since then, the past 5 years, I've spent my time in different AI teams throughout JP Morgan Chase, a computer vision startup called Crowd AI that focused on building a no-code end-to-end platform. So I ended my career there as the chief operating officer when we sold the organization to Saab, which is a defense and security company. And now, as Ravi had mentioned, we are working to integrate AI into all of Saab's products to make them smarter. So again, that constant theme of not just doing AI for the sake of AI, but doing AI in a strategic way to really gain the most benefit from the tech. All right, so to kind of now pivot to why I wanted to talk about this aspect of implementing and building business cases for artificial intelligence, I want to provide some statistics that highlight the truth about implementing AI. This is a really long statistic, so I'm sorry that I'm going to read it out loud now. But 85% of artificial intelligence and machine learning projects fail to produce a return for the business. And the reasons cited for this include poor scope definition, bad training data, organization inertia, lack of process change, mission creep, and insufficient experimentation. So this is from Forbes in 2023. One of the biggest things here you can see is nothing says that we didn't have the right engineers on the problem to solve it. It's all about building the business case and the upfront work that came before actually anybody started writing one line of code. The next quote, and this really supports the first one, but beneath those aspirational headlines and tantalizing potential lies a sobering reality. Most AI projects fail. Some estimates place the failure rate as high as 80%. So Harvard Business Review 2023. And I know right now, especially being in the AI sector, I'll hear companies saying, our products are made with AI. I think I just saw a commercial for a toothbrush made with AI. It's just like, why did that toothbrush need to be made with AI? I'd rather save a couple bucks, right? But it just, again, supports that fact that a good portion of these AI projects are failing. And I do want to say, when I was looking at these statistics, I could understand a high failure rate, right? Because these are moonshot opportunities that you're looking for, high risk, high reward. But if we pair this with this statistic, so AI project failure is 99% about expectations. It's not about the failure of the technology, but the expectations for what people believe the technology can do. This is from CIO.com in 2023. Now, this is interesting, right? Because as our role as engineers, as technology professionals, a lot of times we're thinking about the technology, of course, but we also have a role to be educating the stakeholders that we're working with about the potential of these technologies, where it can be used, and ensuring that we're setting the proper expectations as we're implementing, right? We don't want to be building a solution that then ends up just fizzling out and not working because we weren't doing that upfront work, building that proper business case. And it's not just about the failure, right? We're talking about dollars and time wasted. So as I'm still setting the stage here, I want to highlight this case study. Has anyone heard of this case study from IBM and the University of Texas with Watson Health? So IBM and the University of Texas, I think the project ended in around 2016, but they partnered to use natural language processing to quickly ingest and read thousands of medical research papers, and they were trying to pair this with patient data. And the overall goal was to generate some additional treatment options or diagnoses that a physician might have missed. And that was this thesis that they were working to achieve. But from the start, that there were multiple issues. So, you know, doctors switched the systems that they were using to gather patient data, and then the AI systems weren't able to pull the new data and then integrate it with Watson. Watson also struggled to decipher the doctor's notes and patient history. So, you know, garbage in equals garbage out. And then finally, they really struggled to have any types of generalization and learning across patient data globally, which then made the system, as I had mentioned, the learning across patient to patient hard, and you weren't able to have the knowledge share that you would expect from a system like this. So the result really was that the project was abandoned after 4 years, and then the $62 million invested in this project was lost. So when we're talking about building the business cases, some of these issues could have been scoped out earlier on. And as we're thinking about our future in building these technologies, none of us want to work on a project for 4 years, grinding it out, pulling long hours, just to find out that 4 years later, absolutely not. And one thing I want to highlight here that I actually really like what IBM's doing is that in their current TV ads, they have this quote where they're saying, automate the little things so they can focus on the next big thing. I am talking with a ton of people right now within my current organization, and I say, where do you think we could use AI in your business unit? So people will start coming up with this like very intense, maybe 20-year in the future idea of what they could do. And I'm trying to bring people back to reality of there are things you could do today that could even just save people time from looking at a monitor. When I was working at Crowd AI, I went to the United Arab Emirates, and we were working with a customer where they had people sitting in front of a computer screen around the clock, just looking to see if boats were present on the monitor. That's something that AI could automate within a week. And that could save hours and hours and hours of time to then allow that person to do more high value tasks. That's really the benefit and the baby steps we should be taking with AI today for smart implementation. All right, so I think I've set the stage enough. Now into the meat of the presentation of the steps that I've seen in my previous experiences can help you build that successful business case for AI. The 5 steps I'm going to talk about today are breaking down the problem, deciding if AI is the right solution, understanding the implementation hurdles, estimating the return on investment, and then outlining the path to implementation. So again, all of these are kind of these skills that are not related to building any of these lines of code and starting to do any experiments, but these are those upfront steps that you could be taking to ensure that your projects are not one of those 80% of projects that end up failing and never making it to production. All right, the first one, breaking down the problem. So with this, I want to highlight a story from my time with Solar Impulse. So again, I had mentioned Solar Impulse was flying around the world, only using the power of the sun, and we would stop at different places along the way. I had told you guys the number 1 question we would get is, why are you doing this? But the number 2 question we would get was, what happens if it rains? And then the number 3 question we would get is, when will I fly commercially in a solar powered airplane? And this is a pretty logical question, right? You're seeing people fly around the world in a solar powered airplane and you're wondering, when will I do that? But this was not actually what we were trying to do with the project. With Solar Impulse, we were trying to create a moonshot opportunity that would allow technology companies to push the boundaries of their technology. You know, we were working with solar companies that would, okay, that just, we were working with, we were looking to find a solar company that was able to reduce the size of their solar cells, reduce the size and weight of their solar cells so much that it was almost the thickness of a piece of hair. We were looking for material companies that could build a cockpit insulation that was so efficient that we didn't need a heating and cooling system, even when the plane was up at 28,000 feet and the temperature was negative 20 degrees below or Fahrenheit. The problem we were trying to solve is that we could be doing more with alternative energy solutions, but we don't have a problem that is difficult enough to solve. So let's create one on our own. And this is what I'm talking about when it comes to breaking down the problem, right? You really need to fully understand what problem you're trying to solve if you're going to build that foundation for a business case. Because if I'm communicating what I'm trying to do, and if I'm trying to, again, get the partners that will fund this project, get the partners to buy in, get policymakers to change what they're doing, I need to be explaining why this matters and why we're doing this. And so here are a few things that you can think about when you're breaking down the problem. So again, what problem are you actually trying to solve? I know that I've been working on teams, if it's with Solar Impulse or with other companies, but sometimes it's important to take a step back and say, what are we actually trying to solve? Because sometimes you're so deep in the weeds of building the technical solution that you're forgetting what you're actually trying to do. The next step is, what is the status quo solution? And not even what is the technical solution, but what are you up against? So what is the cost of that solution? What is the energy consumption that that solution requires? Like, what is the market power that that other solution has? You want to be thinking of that because you want to understand what competitive advantage you might need if you're entering in. And then finally, why is a new solution needed? So especially whenever it comes to that question we were asked about, when will I fly commercially in a solar powered airplane? I haven't given this detail that the solar powered airplane actually went between 30 and 60 miles an hour. So if you imagine trying to fly across the Pacific Ocean at that speed, it's 5.5 days, which, you know, that solution isn't really feasible whenever you're trying to break into the market. I see Dr. Lester's face like, oh my gosh, what? But yeah, it was, I could go on and on about that, but you know, we can say that a new solution could be needed to reduce the carbon footprint there, but is that new solution really going to meet the needs of the public? So anyways, you do want to ask yourself, why is that new solution needed? Because you don't want to break something if it's not broken. All right, so on to the second point. So this is decide if AI is the best solution. And I feel like this is one that is tough, especially because a lot of the AI technology is so cool and I like building the models myself, but I want to highlight a little bit about my time at JP Morgan Chase as I'm kind of hammering this point in. So I went to JP Morgan Chase after finishing my master's, and they had trillions of entities of data. They had so much data, and I was a part of their AI ML big data team. Our job was to figure out, with all of this data, where could we add the most value in the organization? It was a really cool job, and it was very open-ended and trying to figure out what exactly we wanted to do with the data. But more often than not, AI was not the answer for what we ended up deploying as a solution. And there were a few reasons for this. So we know that AI has a few flaws. AI has biases, AI has model shifts, so you have to constantly be retraining the data. AI can also sometimes be a black box, so you have to ensure that you have the right teams in place to maintain it. And you also have to have the right leadership in place to be able to jump and grab onto a solution that they might not understand. The final piece was that when we were deploying these large scale models within the organization, it took 6 to 12 months to go through a model governance process. So if we could find a solution that would use some statistical methods like regressions or decision trees, we would choose those 9 out of 10 times just because we could get those solutions to production in 2 months versus potentially a year. So to decide if AI is needed, you want to think of a few things. So how much data is being processed? We all probably know here, AI is great for processing a ton of records of data, right? AI is great when you don't even know what you're looking for in the data, and it pulls it out and tells you these trends that you might have not even your brain might have not have been able to comprehend. The second piece, what are the accuracy requirements? So some of the solutions we would have, just as I mentioned at JP Morgan Chase, we could get 80% of the way there with a regression, and we could get it out in 2 months. And AI might get us an extra couple percentage points. Maybe it even gets us up to 95%. But by the time that model's deployed, will there be model shift? Will we have to retrain it? There were so many questions there, but you really had to ask yourself, is that effort to get a model into production worth that need for accuracy? And then finally, how important is explainability? So that whole concept of the black box is very hard, especially not only are leaders sometimes uncertain about deploying these types of solutions and then having the team maintain them, but us as people that are going to be excelling in our field, we want to be able to, go from project to project and not always be that subject matter expert that's called upon to fix something every time a bug happens in one of the black boxes in our code. So anyways, the main point here is that even though we could do AI for a lot of solutions, we have to really decide, does AI make sense? And then once we decide, the answer could very easily be yes, but we have to build that business case to ensure that it actually gets deployed. All right, we're on the third point now, so about halfway there. This point is around understanding the implementation hurdles. And so the first 2 points were around really understanding the problem, laying the foundation, and deciding, are we going to move forward with AI? Now, this point is kind of thinking about that broad landscape of an organization. So when we're thinking about implementation hurdles, there are a few things that are, again, not related to the technology at all that could cause a complete standstill to your project. So number one, you want to evaluate your internal or client data readiness. So if you're building an AI model for your company, or if you're working for a company to build an AI model for them, you might have decided, yep, this is a problem that we want to solve, and AI is the best solution, but the data might be absolutely a mess. So and that happens a lot, I will let you know. Or I've been in so many situations working with crowd AI where I'll show up to a customer and they say, we have a great problem. We want to solve this. Here's a contract. We have absolutely no data. And you can't build one of these models without the proper data. So that's a project in itself to get a client set up for being data ready. Now, the second implementation hurdle you could face is understanding internal or client tolerance for risks. And now I have this arrow with a picture of a bottle right here, because when I was working at Crowd AI, we were working with one of the largest beverage manufacturers. And one of the things that could have helped us fail fast with a project is understanding their tolerance for risk quicker. We were working with a client for about 3 years. We had worked on multiple AI models for them that were all MVP proof of concepts, but nothing was getting deployed. Finally, we sat down with them and said, we cannot move forward with another model or MVP until we understand what it will take to actually get something deployed. And this example is going to also spill over into this next use case, but they finally told us that the return on investment for any project that they actually deploy was going to be 2 years. I don't know why it took 3 years for us to figure out this number, but if we would have known that earlier on, we probably never would have partnered with them, because of the amount that we were going to be able to save in the food and beverage organization. Every can we could have saved was, I think, a fraction of a penny. So yeah, so it was something where the cost benefit just was not going to be there for artificial intelligence. And especially right now in my current role, we're looking to see, is there a way that we could redefine what our tolerance for risk is for certain artificial intelligence moonshot projects? Because that's also one of these reasons why a lot of projects get stuck in R&D. People want to get involved with artificial intelligence. They want to invest in it because they don't want to miss the boat. There's all this hype around AI, but people are a little lukewarm to jumping fully in on it, and they're not having that. They're a little too risk intolerant, which is then making it harder to actually get these solutions out of R&D. So anyways, having these discussions about risk tolerance is very important as you're building the business case. The final piece I have on here is just reviewing hardware requirements. So I know I was having this conversation with a few of you, but I started my career working with tangible things, a massive solar powered airplane, the manufacturing industry, and then I go to a Silicon Valley startup where everything's happening in the cloud. And a lot of people that I was working with, they had only ever worked in companies like this. So they had not fully had that realization that even if you could do something in a better way, even if someone could totally restructure their manufacturing plant, people can't do that because that's billion-dollar capital investment that they can't throw away. So being able to have a full understanding of someone's hardware requirements and how an AI solution can lay over top of that, and what costs might be required to bring the physical systems and hardware up to speed is really important. Again, as you're building the business case, just making sure that the client is prepared to actually deploy these solutions. All right, so my fourth point here, and I told you that the story kind of goes hand in hand where it's estimating the return on investment. Again, if we would have had these conversations around what return on investment do you need for us to actually be successful in this project earlier on, we would have been more successful. But this is something interesting because I know, thinking about my time at Virginia Tech in electrical engineering, I was constantly thinking about, does my solution work? Is it efficient? Is it doing what it's supposed to do? But I wasn't really ever thinking about, is there a solution that's maybe not as good, that costs less or uses less power? Because like, why would somebody want that, right? Like, why would I build a not great solution? But then you enter into the real world and you realize, oh, someone might want something that's good enough because they can't afford the best in class solution. You know, somebody might need something that just meets certain needs and they're willing to pay, and they're willing just to pay for that. So even in the engineering side, it's important to be thinking about the financial aspect of things, because you're the ones that understand which parts of the technology you can trade off, right? I know from the when I'm scoping out AI projects and doing pricing for it, people will say, well, how about if we just cut the data preparation part? Like, no, you can't cut that part. Like, we can cut some of the other efficiency parts at the end, but these are the parts you can't cut. So that's why you have to be involved in this aspect. And again, this all comes into building that business case and communicating closely with the customer so they understand those expectations of what they will actually get out. And estimating ROI isn't easy. So I remember, again, coming out of a highly technical field and wanting an equation for everything. But you will not have an equation, right? It's going to be extremely ambiguous, and you have to be comfortable with that. The good thing is that there's a big chance that no one knows what the actual answer is, and you're probably the most expert person there. So have that confidence to say, this is my answer, and these are the assumptions why. You want to clearly state your assumptions because, number one, it can help your team understand your thought process and also push back if there's some questions that they have or some, something that you might have missed. And it also allows your stakeholders to know that if any of those assumptions change, that the estimate's not good anymore. And then finally, what I was saying before, so breaking down that cost estimate, it's definitely important when you're communicating the business case and saying, hey, we could do this for you. These are all the must-have components. These are the nice to have. It allows people to understand, what they can get for the money that they're paying for this, what they can get for the investment that they're putting into your project. You have to do these things even if you're working internally, talking with your leadership teams, asking them to fund your project. But it also just shows that you have this broader sense of the business and this high level view and a strategic view of what you're doing. All right, so the final piece, outline the path to implementation. And so as I'm going through this presentation too, I'm thinking a bit about, we're in this interesting time where we have artificial intelligence that is doing things that we had never thought about. I know when I was working at Crowd AI and ChatGPT came out, and it was something that we couldn't even have imagined, right? You have this system that's able to write starter code, the system that's able to generate pictures, the system that can write articles, and sitting and studying and being able to program an artificial intelligence, you might just be thinking, I don't need to build a business case for AI, right? Someone's going to hand me specifications and I will execute that on the technology side. But because we're in such an interesting time, right, we need to be able to differentiate ourselves from AI systems. And that's why building these business cases are important, because AI is good at writing starter code, but AI can't build this implementation strategy for implementing itself. So your job isn't really done when the technology is built. You need to be doing all of these different steps. So the final step here is outlining a path to implementation. Just as I had said, if you want to get your technology actually implemented, you need to be generating influence throughout your whole organization. So right now at Saab, I am working closely with our HR team and in ways that I never had thought I would be. I am helping build out new machine learning job matrices because they had never had machine learning engineers before. So if you're working with other clients, this is something that you might have to propose different career paths for. You might say, hey, we're deploying this solution for you. You might want to consider hiring people with these types of skill set, and this is what it might look like. These are the roles that they might need to have, and this is why you need someone like that. You need to be thinking about production. I had talked about, if you're integrating AI solutions into a manufacturing field, You want to make sure that you are people that are on the floor and they don't see any hurdles to this implementation. IT, of course, whenever it comes to ensuring that you have the proper data lakes and data cleanliness as they're going into the models. Engineering, that's an easy one. Project management, you're going to have to constantly, have maintenance on these AI models. And then the other one that's up here that's a little different is communication. So I've been working a lot with our communications team too. And one of the questions I get a lot is, has our organization even decided that we're going to be involved with AI? And I keep telling people that this is something like, is our organization going to use email? Like, just think about back in the day before email happened, right? Like, we should be recording videos of ourselves saying stuff like that, or trying to explain what is the internet, but it's our role as technology professionals that have experience in these fields to also educate every aspect of our organization, not to be afraid of these technologies, to embrace them, and to also be constantly thinking how the technologies could be used in their sectors, because then they could also be starting to build the business cases for how it could be used, and you could then support them through that process. So again, even though it's probably easier to build the technology, hand it off and say, I'm done, it's our role, if we're going to be those leaders in the organizations, to finish off building the business case and build that implementation roadmap. So this is my summary. The 5 steps break down the problem. We want to properly understand the problem, and that will set the stage for the entire project. We want to decide if AI is the best solution. So again, don't use AI just for the sake of using AI. We want to understand the implementation hurdles. Technology is not the limiting factor whenever it comes to AI projects failing. We need to consider those tangential hurdles that would block that implementation. Estimate ROI. The project, of course, must make financial sense. And even though we're on the technology side, we need to be involved in this because we have that technology background that could influence the direction of what's a nice to have and what's a must have. And then finally, outline the path to implementation. The project does not stop once technology development is complete. All right, with that, I want to thank you all, and I'm happy to answer questions. Like I said, I'd love to stay connected, and my contact information is up there.
All right. Thank you, Paige. That was an excellent talk.
Yeah.
So yeah, the floor is open for questions. And people on Zoom, you're free to ask as well. So again, you can either just ask your question or type it in the chat box, and Sheila will read them out for us.
Yeah.
Hi, this is on, yeah. I'm Alex, hi. You talked about your time at JP Morgan and had said that you were on, I forget, you said it was like the big data AI/ML team. And you said that a lot of projects that you were tasked with sort of judging the feasibility of applying AI solutions to ended up just not really being the best fit for AI. How did your, I don't know if to call them like higher ups, or how did like the management team that was giving you these tasks and asking these questions, how did they react when their AI team said, don't use AI? Like, was that something they were receptive to? How do you really approach that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So that was actually something, from the leadership, that was something they were pushing down on the team. So it wasn't just our team saying, hey, AI didn't make sense here. But we did have a lot of people coming straight out of these amazing PhD programs, amazing master's programs, ready to do these really cool AI models. So it was kind of a culture shift that I'm glad that I had the experience going through, because I had never really considered that, yeah, it could make sense not to use AI in cases, and being able to build that business case and say, hey, for this use case, we can use a regression, get it out in 2 months, as I mentioned, and we'll get the solution we need. So I think that depending on the project we had, and if we didn't build the proper business case, I think it, again, all goes back to the business case. They would probably be a little skeptical of like, okay, do you not want to go through this process? Because there was a lot of documentation. But if we were able to show that documentation of, hey, look, we found this way to do it and we could get around the process, they were actually very happy to see that we could find a way to do things in a quicker way.
So you're almost always not just saying don't use AI for this, you're saying use this other thing instead. It's always like presenting it as an alternative solution as opposed to just shutting down.
Yeah,
Saying like this would be a 2-year investment. We can't do it like this, but you're actually also just saying instead we're using this solution. It's 80% accurate.
exactly. Yeah. So it was always presenting an alternative solution. So yeah, I think that's a really good way to look at it. And yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good question.
Questions like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I learned a lot at Virginia Tech. I mean, I loved my time in the ECE department. And I think one of the biggest things that I would say that I learned is just that ability to solve hard problems and not be afraid of solving them. You know, at ECE, we're taking a very wide range of classes. Like now that I think about it, I saw a picture of one of my like electromagnetic fields 2 homeworks that I had probably submitted online or something. And I just was so impressed with the breadth of knowledge that I had. So I think just that ability to like stretch my brain and not be afraid to take on a project then like Solar Impulse. I was 22 and thinking about, I have 2 younger siblings. So they are now thinking, how did you do those things when you were that age? And I think I know I'm crediting Virginia Tech a lot for that confidence and ability to jump in and solve problems like that. So I know that's not specifically like one thing, but I think just that the confidence and ability to solve problems was probably my biggest takeaway. And then I think one thing, and we were talking about this earlier, but I've now been in the startup world and I've gained a lot of new perspective for where I can take my career, where when I graduated, and I guess I kind of said this in the presentation too, but I thought I could be an engineer 1 and then an engineer 2 and then maybe an engineer. But when I worked with Solar Impulse, any boundary I had on my career or linear path I thought I would have was shattered. And so now I've been thinking of all of these aspects of, you know, can you be a part of a startup and sell it, or can you know, incubate different technology, and just again having a wider view for where I can use an ECE degree. Thanks for the question.
Questions?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And that kind of highlights again where there is so much uncertainty around that. And that's why it's important not to always go to AI just because you could. But I think, so I'm trying to think of a good example when I was with Crowd AI, because what we were doing was we were building models and then we were selling them to different customers. And we usually had processes where we would actually like do robust data analyses after deploying a model to then know how quickly was the model drifting. And when we had to relay, we were in the computer vision sector, so we were actually labeling images and then retraining a model and redeploying it. So one thing I would say there is that once you deploy an AI model, like your job is not done. It's the constant analysis and doing the different, like post-processing steps to ensure that what you've actually delivered is still going to be consistent, especially in different environments and different weather conditions, and again, all computer vision here. But yeah, so this is why I was talking about the implementation strategy is so important, where you need to have the proper teams in place. You need to be thinking about, like, once I hand this system off, are you going to have the teams that can ensure, yeah, things are working? So I know that's not necessarily a straightforward answer, but I think that's why I wanted to include that final step of ensuring the pathway, because it's not like if you're building a product and you hand it to somebody, it's you're building a technology that you kind of have to constantly watch, that's going to evolve, that you'll need to retrain, and you need to have the team there to be able to do that. Thank you.
Questions? I actually had a question about that really cool slide you had with the aircraft. And I noticed, as you mentioned, it's a 70 kilometer per hour speed, top speed, I think.
Was it this one? Yeah.
Yeah. So first, I had two questions. One of these is like probably really naive, but so when you're crossing the Atlantic or the Pacific and you hit a storm or something, what was the contingency plan? Like, what would you do if you had to land or something while we were doing the transit and you're in the middle of the oceans?
Yeah. So yeah, Solar Impulse was definitely very interesting because it was a huge jump outside of the classroom. You had a ton of variables that were hitting you from all directions. So I remember our first flight, I could go into a little detail. So I was actually standing on the side of the runway because one of my jobs was to actually run and then grab onto this bar that hung off the wing. I mean, you saw me holding it in one of the images, but the plane would land on just two wheels. So someone had to actually be supporting it, which somehow my electrical engineering degree qualified me for. But we had so I was saying that I remember my first flight, I was standing on the side of the runway, just hoping, like, oh my gosh, I hope it comes down with, two wings and no holes in the side. Like, there was so many variables. But we had a really large team of meteorologists that sat in Monaco, and they were constantly communicating with the pilot. And we were very strategic on when we would fly. So that's also one of the reasons, not only the fact that it was a one-seater plane, it went super slow, but we would stop in different locations and strategically choose the time of flying based on weather conditions. We also went mainly along the equator to avoid any crazy storms. So another reason why commercial flight is probably not going to be very soon with solar powered airplanes.
No, so that's a great, yeah. So that was actually the second point I was coming to, and yeah, so it has like a top speed or an average speed of 70 kilometers an hour. But that sounds, so what's the payload on? Can this carry? Can it carry any reasonable amount of payloads at all, or?
No, so the plane, like I had said, the whole plane weighed around like 5,000 pounds. Yeah. And so really the pilot was pretty much on a strict diet of making sure that, when we were in Hawaii, he wasn't, I guess, like eating too much pineapple or something. But yeah, weight was definitely a big option, or big thing. And when you're thinking about the solar cells, you have these cells that are powering the engines. And so anything you could do to reduce the weight was helpful. And anything you could do to ensure that all of the energy generated from the cells were going to powering the airplane was good. And that's why I had mentioned the cockpit. They didn't want to have a heating and cooling system because, that would take power. One interesting thing about the plane too is it would fly day and night. So 5.5 days, one person across the Pacific. It would go up to 28,000 feet at night, charge up its, fly and charge up its batteries, and then kind of glide and then use its reserves during the day. Then the pilot would hope the sun would come up again and then go back up and down, up and down. Yeah. So it was definitely it was a flying laboratory. Yeah, very interesting to be a part of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the hardest thing right now is everyone's looking for how they can use AI in their business. And one of the hardest things I would say when I was working at Crowd AI is I could also tell that I was talking to a lot of high up people at companies where it seemed a bit evident that some executive leadership team said, find an AI solution for us. But so they were just looking like, what can we do in AI? And that's why, again, what problem are you trying to solve is the biggest thing, because AI for the sake of AI doesn't make sense, and people can't pay for it because AI is not cheap. And like we talked about, like maintenance of AI is really important as well. So yeah, so I would say that theoretically people would want an explainable solution like a regression or something that just gets them ahead, that's a data-driven solution, but everyone also is excited about the buzzword.
Other people's comments in their project work, yeah, we'll generate the answer for that.
Yeah.
Or like summarize emails for executives.
Yeah.
Emails anymore.
Yeah.
What extent should that should be called?
Yeah.
Everything is small. Our knowledge will be scoped to what the summary we get, not the detail.
Yeah. No, I mean, and this is a hot topic, and I think especially at the university level, I'm not sure what Virginia Tech's specific policy is on it, but I know that, so I've been writing for IEEE for the past 3 years, and I wrote an article of how you can use ChatGPT right when ChatGPT came out. And one of my professors at Carnegie Mellon said, we're trying to figure out what's our strategy for telling the students what they should do. And I thought this was interesting. I was like, don't you guys do a lot of AI too? Well, how do you guys not have a strategy? Or I was like, anyways, but so it's an open topic that I think a lot of people aren't sure about. My viewpoint on it is that, my viewpoint on it is that AI is a tool and it has to be treated like a tool. So if you're using it to summarize notes, and you could be more efficient and you could read like 30 times the amount that you could read as just a normal person, why wouldn't you use that tool? I think the problems come whenever you're using AI as the final solution. So if I were to use AI, for example, to write an article for IEEE, that article I think would be super bland and boring and just not have any of the flair that I would like to give the articles I write. So I think if you're using it as a tool, then it's good, but the problems come into when you're just, you're not putting yourself into it. Did that? Yeah.
Hello? Oh, hello. Anyway, thanks so much for the presentation. It was amazing. Kind of sidetracking, like following like this kind of question in your answer, right? What's your take and your opinion on the current conversations we're having all over the globe about AI regulations and the impacts and potential?
Yeah. I think I say this a lot. Like the hardest thing right now is that no matter what someone's level of expertise is in the field of AI, everyone has an opinion, right? Everyone knows about AI and they've seen it in movies and they've seen the headlines. So that's why also, again, it's important for us with experience in AI to be educating people on what the technology can do. And I also think, when I was working at Crowd AI, we had a lot of ethics discussions. And these are really important because there are things that, from my perspective, I might have not even thought about whenever it comes to regulations or like a potential ethical concern of AI. So we have to, of course, be talking about these in real applications and not about the whole aspect of, well, what if this scenario comes up or what if this scenario comes up? I think that, you know, people that are actually doing the programming that are raising concerns should be free to be able to communicate that. Yeah, one of the things that, you know, is definitely a gap right now is the way that AI is going to be governed. And I don't know if anyone has a great answer for that, but that's why, you know, some of these softer skills on building business cases or even just dipping into like the concepts of public policy and regulation, I think is going to help us all, because again, we're the ones that know what this technology can do, and we should be influencing how it's being regulated.
Another question online. Hi, Paige, great talk. Can you please talk about what lessons learned from your handle?
Yeah. So, yeah, thanks for the question. I think that really, I kind of, you know, struggled. Did I want to get a degree that was more technical, or did I want to get an MBA? And I really think being able to, as I had mentioned, put your hands on the keyboard and see what the technology can do is so much more powerful than just being able to read about it in, you know, a case study, for example. So that worked really well for me. And just being able to, if you're trying to, you know, delegate a task to somebody and saying, hey, can you do this? It's really important for you to understand the complexity of that task. I know, for example, I had an experience where I was working with a developer and we were trying to meet this deliverable, and I said we were going to do X, Y, and Z. And the next morning I met with the person and they said, I had pulled an all-nighter to get this done. And I said, oh my God, like, why didn't you tell me this? Like, I did not want you to pull an all-nighter at all. And so, you know, I think that my master's allowed me to have at least a concept for some of the complexities that go into the tasks. But I also think a message for anybody that's on that developer side, it's important to communicate how complex the task is, because like this was something I thought was easy, but was extremely hard. And so that was probably maybe an example of me being a bad leader. But again, it's always communication whenever it comes to that stuff. But yeah, I think one of my biggest things, like for leadership, I think any leader should be a member of the team and actually being there and in the weeds. So in that case, if my team member was pulling an all-nighter, I kind of wish they would have told me and I would have been there right alongside them, making sure that I was there to help them with anything.
Other questions?
I had a more general question for Paige.
Yeah.
You know, the customer actual but is that the I know, you know, I don't think that it has a risk that you ask what you expect, what you expect. What if the problem with this answer?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great point. And that again goes into that aspect of AI is extremely tricky whenever it goes. I know there have been a ton of use cases with medical diagnosis or medical diagnoses with like different skin colors, for example, with computer vision, where if you don't have a certain amount of training data, or if the data is biased, you're not going to get the same result. And yeah, I think I'm trying to think of a good example off the bat from Crowd AI for how we were able to do that. There were a couple of novel technologies that we were able to use that were called like few shot learning, where instead of just being able to, and this again is in the computer vision sector, but instead of just being able to like take a picture and draw a box and say, this is simplified, but in this box is a cat. like being able to use the key points and saying, you know, these are certain features and structures that would make up a cat. And then that helps make it a bit more accurate, where you're not looking for these, you're not teaching the computer to necessarily look for patterns, but you're kind of looking for shapes and structures, which is something that we've seen happen successfully. But I do think that to ensure that, you know, if you're not using a technique like that, you definitely need some rigorous testing for biases afterwards. So again, like, you don't build it and then just deploy it and say the precision's great, done. You want to see, are you getting the diverse results, I guess, at the end. But yeah, I think that's still probably something that, yeah, there's always going to be an edge case that keeps being uncovered, and that's why you need that team to continue maintaining the system. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think, you know, it's so hard because I think having, I've loved my experience working at startups, and I've also loved my experience in the corporate sector, and kind of, you know, there's pain points that come with both of those, right? At the startup, you're wearing multiple hats, and you don't have any support in different things. So you're maybe dropping balls more than you feel comfortable doing. But then in the corporate world, you have more red tape and, you know, hierarchy for decision making. I do think that I'm happy that I took some time at JP Morgan, for example, where technical storytelling was something that I had no idea that I was learning along the way. So we would spend so much time building PowerPoints when I was at JP Morgan Chase. We would be, you know, asking questions like, should this color be blue? Should this color be green? And I would say, is this really our job, right? I'm an electrical engineer, I'm not a graphic designer. But now understanding the way that people look at slides and not hoping that they get the message from it, but actually putting a kind of a bumper sticker or a call out saying, this is what you should get from this slide, is something that I really walked away from that experience. And I don't think if I would not have spent time in a big corporation like that, I don't think I would have been as strong at technical storytelling. So I do recommend spending some time there, but then transitioning to a smaller organization and then seeing how those skills actually could play out and, you know, grow into more leadership roles is great.
Questions? Right, if not, let's thank Paige again. Thanks, Paige, again.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys. Yeah, thanks so much, you all. I know that my friend Megan is coming to speak in 2 weeks, and she has a really exciting topic to talk about the space industry. So I'm excited for her to speak with you all and share what she has to say.
Excellent. Yeah, we're looking forward to Megan's visit as well. So thank you.